Secretary, in response to Senator McCaskill's contracting concerns, you said that the best way to avoid these kinds of problems was, quote, having a methodical review for every dollar going out.
Right.
And I couldn't agree more. So I want to ask you about a particular RFP coming up. The Pentagon has announced that it intends to bring all of its computing services under one cloud in a $10 billion single award contract. And the department issued an RFI last month, which received over 1,000 questions and comments from industry and leading technology experts who, for the most part, believe that the current proposal is deeply misguided. Yet the department seems to be rushing ahead to issue an RFP in early May and intends to issue an award as early as September. What is the rush here, and why is the Pentagon moving forward so quickly despite the concerns of both Congress and technology leaders?
Senator, the rush right now is that we have too many data banks that the frontline commanders cannot swiftly draw information from. So what we have been looking at right now is how do we get faster access for the young folks on the front lines and displaying the information they need, not all the information in the world that clouds what they need. So that is the driving impetus. It's the lethality. It is not a sole source, and there's no pre-select.
But it is a single award.
It will be for 2 years for about,
business,
I want to say it's around $7 billion
contract.
The first contract is a single award. It has, I think, a 2-year base and then some options. Current technology makes it...
That's why I think it deserves some attention. I don't want to quibble with you about sole source, but I think it deserves some oversight. And we included language in the Omni that requires you to submit a full justification for executing a single award, not sole source, single award contract, instead of a multi-cloud approach. Are you going to be able to submit that justification as required by law, and will it happen before or after the RFP?
We always can align ourselves with the law, Senator. When is it going to be brought in?
Both reports will actually be submitted at the time the first report is due, so there's normally a gap. We're going to get them both in on May 7th, and that will be before the RFP.
Fantastic. And to be perfectly clear, there are people speculating that this is tailor-made for a single vendor, and I would just ask you to assure me that those concerns are not justified.
Sir, our goal is to get the best possible service for the front line. I'm aware that some people in industry perhaps believe that this should be an equal opportunity thing where everybody gets a piece of the pie. We have got to go forward in a defensible way where you can go to your constituents and say they did the right thing ethically as well as legally in order to carry out the best possible support for our frontline troops. If we can't do that,
I want to see us get the best deal for the best product for the people who actually use it on the front lines.
Yes.
I hate to go back to cyber deterrence, but it's an endless topic. So, General Dunford, Secretary Mattis, we keep hearing from combatant commanders appearing before this committee that we need a cyber doctrine. We hear a common refrain that this requires a whole of government approach, which we've heard so many times that now it's starting to sound more like it's someone else's job. Our adversaries don't see any significant consequences at this point for their cyber actions, and we need to demonstrate an effective, credible deterrent. When are we going to have that national cyber doctrine to address this issue?
I can tell you we're working on it, sir. Inside the Department of Defense, we've got cyber orders out. We've got 130 of 133 cyber teams already manned. There's more training going on. We've got to get in place a persistent cyber training environment to bring them to the top of their game. So we're organizing here for the Defend the Nation effort, which I think is what you're referring to, Senator. You know we're in support of obviously the Secretary of Homeland Security. That said, this is a very challenging effort, and I believe that congressional guidance will be necessary as we weigh life and liberty right out of our Constitution, and what role do you want the military to play inside the United States in a defense mode? And I think this is something that you need to lead us on, because this is not our normal operating location. Unless there's, as you know, a forest fire or insurrection, we don't do this stuff. We stay focused overseas. So I think the more clarity we get from the Congress, the better. And I think we have to work with the executive branch, all of us there, including the Secretary of Treasury, for example, and the Secretary of Energy. It's a very big issue right now. We're going to have to break it down into bite-sized pieces. And from the authorities that start here in the spirit of Congress to guide us, we can go forward on this.
We need to get started then, Chairman.
Thank you. And Senator Perdue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to echo the Secretary's opening comments about expressing our gratitude to our folks in uniform around the world. The best of the best is out there on the wall. General Dunford, in your testimony, you now are calling space a contested domain. In your words, potential adversaries view our alliance on this domain as a vulnerability they can exploit, and they're increasingly challenging our competitive advantage in space. You know, for the last, few decades, we've used space as a scientific endeavor, where our potential adversaries in the last decade have been using it as a potential military domain, obviously. China in 2007 conducted an ASAT, anti-satellite missile test. It was successful and threw thousands of pieces of debris into that orbit. 16, they put up a so-called space debris clearer that could clear that in supposed terms, but also could potentially wreak havoc on our satellites. Even DNI Coates talks about any future conflict would occur with Russia and China would see this potentially be the first opening salvo, would be an attempt to take out our satellite capabilities. We now see China with a snuggler satellite capability that's being talked about publicly. And a particular concern, DNI Coates' words, a particular concern, Russia and China could continue to launch experimental, in parentheses, satellites that conduct sophisticated on-orbit activities, with at least some of which are intended to advance counter-space capabilities. And yet, with our advanced battle management system, it seems to me that over the last several months, we've been briefed on the future direction. I'm talking about 10 years out in the future plan, is that we have a strong dependence on our space capabilities. In the interim term, can you give us some comfort that the military is moving to protect any dependence we have on this space capability, and then give us a little of your thinking about moving more capability from the air, land, and sea domains to the space domain?
As soon as I can, and you raise a good issue. I mean, I think it's important just to go back and look at the assumption that we made when we started to leverage space for our command and control, for our intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, for our navigation, for the precision weapons we had. We made an assumption that space would be uncontested. And many of the systems that we put into space were not resilient, and so they weren't able to survive against the anti-satellite technology and other capabilities that the enemy now has to either jam or destroy our space capabilities. In the budget this year, and really starting last year, we have started investing broadly the category we call space resilience, which is a variety of things. It's hardening some of the capabilities we have in space today, making sure that new capabilities have in the requirements documents the right requirements to make sure they're resilient to the challenges we expect in the future, and then also ideas of more satellites, leveraging commercial satellites and so forth, and perhaps smaller satellites so that all of our capabilities aren't in one single satellite. With regard to characterization, debris, and so forth, and command and control, by no means am I suggesting where we need to be, but frankly, starting back a few years ago under General Hyten, who's now at Strategic Command, he was formerly at Space Command in the United States Air Force. We started an initiative to establish a more effective command and control. A key piece of that command and control in our Joint Space Operations Center is the ability to characterize debris in space and to be able to make adjustments in our operating concepts to accommodate that debris in space. So this is absolutely an area of focus in the department. I think the budget this year reflects that in 19, it reflects it in 18. And for me, from a warfighting perspective, we have to solve this problem. We have built a force that is dependent on space. Now, on the other side, in our exercises, we're also now increasingly making sure that we're able to operate in a space-denied or degraded environment and make sure that we can accommodate degradation to the capabilities that we have today that leverage space. But all those things are very much on our minds, Senator. I appreciate you raising it because I think in the areas that we are concerned about, we say there's not a war in space. There's a war that involves the capabilities that we have in space.
Sorry, I'm about out of time, but would you quickly just comment on the Israeli-Iran potential cataclysmic confrontation potential that is sitting there in Syria with Iran? The Persian Empire throughout history, had a land bridge when they were at their height all the way to the Mediterranean. It sure looks like everything Iran is doing right now is trying to reestablish that land bridge through Iraq and Syria and Lebanon into the Mediterranean. But right now we see a really dangerous crossfire between U.S. and Russia forces in the area and also now between Israel and Iran. You've talked publicly about this, but give us some indication about the way you're thinking about this right now.
Senator, very quickly, the Iran regime, the Tehran regime, not the Iranian people, are clearly in strength using their proxies in Syria. We have seen them trying to bring advanced weaponry in through Syria on its way to the Lebanese Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Israel is not going to wait until those missiles are in the air. Will it be cataclysmic? I hope not. I hope Iran pulls back.
Is there a nuclear threat in that potential confrontation?
A nuclear threat?
Yes, sir.
No, sir. Not at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Perdue. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For over 3 years, a Saudi Arabia-led coalition has been bombing Yemen to counter Iranian-backed Houthi militia. The United States military has been providing intelligence, mid-air refueling, and munitions to the Saudis. In other words, we've been helping and helping a lot. Our refueling assistance to the Saudi-led coalition is governed by something called the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement, or ACSA, I think. The United States has such an agreement with both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The Secretary of Defense is authorized to enter into these agreements with any non-NATO country, and it must notify Congress 30 days before it signs such an agreement. Secretary Mattis, can you give me a ballpark number for how many acquisition and cross-servicing agreements that the United States has entered into with other countries?
I'll have to take it for the record, and I'll get back. I think I can get back to you very quickly on that, Senator Warren. This was, as you know, a decision by the previous administration that we inherited, reviewed, and endorsed.
So what I'm trying to get at, though, is how many of these agreements? You don't even have a ballpark for what the number is?
I do not, Senator.
Okay. After an ACSA is signed, the Defense Department is required to report to Congress. Or let me ask, is the Defense Department required to report to Congress on a regular basis about the type of defense assistance that's provided, or to report on any changes in the ACSA?
I'm going to have to get back to you, Senator. I know we have many times testified about this, as did people sitting in these chairs in the last administration to from President Obama's administration. You did characterize it correctly, what this one is about, however.
And I think you'll find that there is no regular report required. And last month, I joined a letter with Ranking Member Reed and Senator Blumenthal to the Defense Department asking for details about the acquisition and cross-servicing agreements that we have with Saudi Arabia and the UAE as they continue their bombing campaign in Yemen. Now, the DoD responded with copies of the congressional notifications for these agreements. One was dated February 1988, and the other July 1992. Those are pretty old notifications, given that we signed defense agreements with Saudi Arabia in 2016 and the UAE in 2006. Now, I'm concerned that these agreements have existed not just with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but with many other countries and with very little oversight from Congress during the administration of both parties. And I think that needs to change. There's another question I want to ask about Secretary Mattis, and that is the National Defense Strategy, which says that, quote, long-term strategic competitions with China and Russia are the principal priorities for the Department of Defense. The strategy stresses the need to modernize existing equipment, to invest in advanced capabilities, and to enhance the readiness of joint forces for a high-end fight. Many analysts have said that a conflict on the Korean Peninsula could bog us down for years, degrading our equipment and potentially resulting in thousands of casualties to our allies and to our own troops. So my question, Secretary Mattis, is what would be the impact of a long-term conflict on the Korean Peninsula on our ability to prepare for a high-end conflict like those described in the defense strategy?
Well, as you've seen, Senator, where the full court press has been for the last year on a diplomatic initiative that is now bearing fruit. It's taken a long time, and there's a lot. I think it can be fruitful. We're all optimistic or hopeful, but we're just going to see how it works. Every effort's being made that any resort to war is the last resort as we reduce.
I appreciate that, Secretary Mattis, but my question is, if we get bogged down in a long-term ground conflict in Korea,
right,
what I'm asking about is what would be the impact on our ability to prepare for a high-end conflict like those that are described in the defense strategy.
You know, war is such an unpredictable phenomenon, Senator. I wouldn't subscribe to that we would get bogged down. In other words, it might go a lot faster. Neither you nor I can tell if it's going to take 2 years or 2 months.
So I'm going to try a third time. If there is a long-term conflict on the Korean Peninsula, what impact would that have on our ability to prepare for a high-end conflict like the kind described in the defense strategy?
It would be distracting, Senator.
More than distracting?
Well, if you look at what's happened over the irregular fights over the last 15 years, you get a sense of what happens when you're distracted over that time from focusing on the primary threat. But we are not going to do that. The Senate is or the Congress has reorganized the department, and we now have an undersecretary who focuses on nothing but research and engineering for the future. And so he will continue what he's doing. The department will continue those efforts. Obviously, this will be a distraction of enormous proportions.
You know, I will point out that last week I asked the nominee for Pacific Command, Admiral Philip Davidson, the same question, and he put it differently. He said any long-term conflict has significant financial costs and costs around the globe and people costs within the armed services. So I'm concerned about what would happen if we were in a position with both. But let me just
So am I,
say,
Senator.
good. I am very glad to hear about your commitment to a diplomatic solution with North Korea and that we not get bogged down into a long-term conflict there. Thank you, Mr.
We've
Secretary.
been committed the entire administration's time, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your continued service to our country. Secretary Norquist, thank you and your team very much for sitting down with me not all that long ago to review the DoD audit and your progress there. I am very glad that you enjoy reading those audit reports. So thank you for your work on that.
And Senator, I appreciate your interest in the subject. Thank you.
Very much. General Mattis, the Truman Carrier Strike Group, the Truman Carrier Strike Group just recently departed from Norfolk, and we wish them well. Recent reports suggest that they may remain in the European theater, which is breaking with tradition rather than deploying to the Middle East as they have during deployments of the past. Can you speak about the need to make our military less operationally predictable and how we can posture our joint force to truly make our adversaries counter us in the multi-domain?
Yes, I can, Senator. Naval forces, by their very makeup, very composition, are naturally agile forces that can be deployed anywhere. In the past, we have focused on simply maintaining a forward presence. Now with the National Defense Strategy saying that we are going to focus on large power, great power competition, it means that without breaking the families and without breaking the fleet or the field forces of the Army, the Air Force, whatever, we are going to make certain they're capable of deploying and fighting at a higher level of capability. What that means is the chairman, under his global integrator role, where I have given him the authority with my oversight, civilian oversight, to maneuver forces around in a manner that makes us strategically reliable as an ally to our allies, but operationally unpredictable to our adversaries. And this is part of making certain that we get out of acting with our Navy like we're a shipping line and get back into acting like a Navy.
And I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. I think anything we can do to keep our adversaries off kilter, we need to do that. So thank you. As well, we've been talking a lot about the National Defense Strategy, and General Mattis, it does reference expanding, in quote, expanding the competitive space. Russia has been very, very successful in competing with the United States below the threshold of actual conflict in what we call the gray zone. They have been very aggressive through their military posturing. They've used political influence. They've done information operation campaigns. What does expanding the competitive space mean for competitions with Russia?
We're going to have to be able to compete across all the domains of warfare, and we had two of them on this planet, land and sea, for several thousand years. In the last 100 years, we added the air component, and in the last 10 years now, or 5 years, we're really focused in on the cyber domain and the outer space domain. We're going to have to be able to compete there, but there's more than that. America is still a great beacon of hope to people who want to run their own lives. We support sovereignty and territorial integrity. We don't believe nations should be requiring tribute from other nations using the statement of one belt, one road. We don't believe that Russia has a veto authority over the countries along its periphery or has any right to change international borders through the force of arms. And so we're going to have to be able to compete across diplomatic, economic, information, energy lines. And we are engaged in that on a routine basis in the sit room in the White House as we orchestrate and integrate this effort.
Very good. Thank you very much. And thanks for the reference to DIME as well. I think it's really important. And then the FY18 NDAA included a provision to provide assistance to our partner forces to support U.S. special operations combating irregular warfare threats. Have you identified additional resources or new authorities that will help support those lines of effort, especially when we're trying to counter malign Russian influence?
I have not seen where we don't have the authorities we need, whether it be through the NATO support that you're aware of and you fund. We are expanding the Special Operations Forces, mostly niche capabilities. It's not a wholesale, everything in the Special Forces being expanded. But let me just ask the chairman to weigh in on this.
There is, Senator, in the European Defense Initiative, a special operations component to training and exercises as well, if you're talking specific to the European theater.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. My time has expired. I appreciate your continued service. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gentlemen, once again, thank you for your testimony here today. Secretary Mattis, as you and I have spoken on many occasions about advanced technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, and how those types of technologies will radically change warfare and how we fight wars in the future. And we also know that our near-peer adversaries are working very aggressively on acquiring these as well. That it is certainly critical for us to be working on it with a great deal of attention. So my question to you, though, Secretary Mattis, is that I know the Department is working on establishing a joint artificial intelligence center. Could you talk a little bit about that and give us some detail as to what you're thinking about?
I can, Senator Peters. Like you say, we've discussed these issues many times, and this is probably one of the leading efforts we have, but we also have these kind of efforts going on big data, on computing, hyperscience. In this case that you're asking about here, what we're doing, we're finding a number of efforts in the department that are funded separately. Some of them are making some good progress. Some haven't achieved what I would call outputs yet. The Deputy Secretary, the Chief Management Officer are pulling this together, and we're going to try to get a synergy going so that all the money going into this is purposeful. It's going for objectives, and we're not talking about 3 years from now. We're talking 3 months, 6 months now. What are we doing to get these processes underway to deliver capability in the near term?
Is there something this committee can do to help you in your efforts?
I need to come back to you once we've got it organized, sir. It's taken me, believe it or not, it's taken me several months just in order to identify everything we've got going on in this regard. Once we have it aligned, I'll be back to you, I'm sure, saying what we need. Right now, I think we need to get our act together.
I appreciate that. I'll look forward to working with you as you continue down that road. The other question that I have relates to the procurement process. Yesterday, the Government Accountability Office released its 16th annual assessment of DoD weapon systems acquisitions, which tracks the $1.6 trillion portfolio over 86 weapon systems. And the report emphasized a troubling trend that too many programs are proceeding without, as they call it, key knowledge essential to good acquisition outcomes. In fact, if I look at the summary here, basically the Comptroller General states, as we first observed in 2017, production is the acquisition phase most closely associated with cost growth, where a lot of these projects are now moving into. Consequently, DoD's continued willingness to accept knowledge gaps in these newer programs, now over 8 years after the implementation of acquisition reforms, indicates that reforms have not yet taken hold to the extent that Congress intended. Secretary Mattis, could you respond to that finding, and anyone else on the panel would be appreciated?
I believe the finding is accurate. This is why a year ago when I came in, I talked about reforming business practices. Today I come back with the same words, and then I add accountability. We believe this is a problem. Now, there are specific processes to get at this. One of them is make certain you keep people who are running programs in the program long enough that you really get a result from what they learned from the first year, and they're not leaving the second or third year. Second point is you have to get the requirements right up front, sir. Now, in some of these, I would call it new technology areas, that can be a challenge. And you understand that when we come back in and say, well, we found something through basic research that we didn't know before. But we have got to do better at getting the requirement right up front, and then don't have requirement growth midway. Specifically on this, we cannot bring technology in that is not at a mature level. If we do that before we prototype it, and I realize that can create a time lag, but that's where we've seen some of this growth come from. So as we define the problem, it's people, it's processes, and then there's actual technical reasons that we've got to correct, and that's leadership's responsibility. Thus, we've assigned accountability for each of these programs as a co-equal priority.
Great. Thank you, Secretary. My remaining time, and it's low, I'd just like to ask a brief question about Yemen. All of you know that Yemen remains a humanitarian disaster, disease, famine, unsafe drinking water, violence, killing hundreds of Yemenis every day. I previously asked General Votel about this issue, and he attributed some of the civilian casualties that we see associated with Saudi strikes as related to the competence of the forces that were operating, referring to the Saudis there. Secretary Master General Dunford, briefly, could you comment on that? Has the competence of these forces operating in Yemen increased, and what can we expect in the future?
Sir, I'll let the chairman hit on a couple things we've actually done to reduce the number of innocents being hit. This is a tragedy. It is a catastrophe humanitarian-wise. I will tell you that we now, as of about 3 weeks ago, we have for the first time, I believe, a United Nations envoy, a very experienced British diplomat, Michael Griffin, who's in. I've met with him. State Department's met with him. We are going to give him full support as we did his predecessor. But for the first time, I think we have someone with the force of personality and the experience to help drive this to a close and end it. But there are some specific things we've done to address the innocent casualties.
Senator, I think mitigating the risk of civilian casualties with strikes is probably two issues. There's a cultural issue, and then there's a technical issue. And I think we've had a positive impact with the Saudis in both regards by the advising and assisting we have been doing. We are co-located with them in their operation centers to help them develop the techniques and tactics that will allow them to conduct strikes while mitigating civilian casualties. And I also think there's been a positive effect of the relationship that we've built with the Saudis over time and the training to affect the changes in the culture that would have them take that into account when conducting military operations. So it's a long plotting process. We in many cases with the countries we're working on addressing those two issues, but I think it's paying dividends over time.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I got one quick question, and it has to do with the budget. The President's budget calls for a 2.6% pay raise and other boost in military spending. One concern that I have, if you see the trajectory for pay over time, we're going to end up seeing some of that money to sustain that at the expense, probably somewhere over the, I think in the $47 billion range. So how do you pay, how are you going to be able to sustain, how are you going to continue to do what we should do, which is continue to try and keep up with the cost of living and the competition y'all mentioned earlier in terms of retaining people with a growing economy, and then deal with the erosion of resources that would otherwise go to other priorities within the department? And General Mattis, or Secretary Mattis, I'll start with you.
Senator Tillis, one difference about the way we look at people in the military, we look at them as an investment, not as part of our overhead. We educate them, we train them, we screen them, we screen them again and again and again. And the idea is that we have best of breed going up, and we're pretty good at promoting the right people and keeping an elite force. Part of this is making certain that the sacrifice of military life that can never be mitigated.
No question, but
this
Mr.
is one way to
Secretary, how do you
it.
deal with the erosion? If you continue the trend line, how do you deal with the erosion based on other DoD priorities?
Well, I believe we have to look at this as America can afford survival, Senator. We're at 3.1% of GDP. If we can do better on our health care, in other words, reduce personnel costs outside the pay raise, if we can do better in our contracting so we're getting better return on the dollar, we're looking at finding those savings inside the department and making the argument to you that we get to keep them and apply them to the very direction that you're concerned with, and rightly so.
Thank you. General Dunford, did you have something?
Senator, I'd just say, I think, as you know, the pay raise this year was benchmarked against a pretty consistent index that we've used over time with the ECI, and while acknowledging the challenges we'll face in balancing compensation with the other pieces of the department, I do believe, and we had a discussion about it earlier, I do believe that we're in a very competitive market right now for high-quality people. And I don't believe that we're paying our people too much. And so we do have to find efficiencies within the department in a wide range of ways to get the right balance. But I would not argue at this point that the personnel account is an anchor on the department. Getting the right people in is the cornerstone of us being successful.
Well, thank you all. In my capacity as the subcommittee chair on personnel, I'm always looking for good ideas to give you more flexibility, find those efficiencies, and then plow them back into making sure we're paying our men and women. I may have another question about funding, but I do have something that's a little bit, I tend not to get too specific. I focus on the business issues, but I want to talk about Turkey for a minute. And I want to talk about it on two fronts. One, they're below the NATO guideline for, as a percentage of GDP, their participation. I think it's trending somewhere around 1.5%. The target's 2%. And 2, I'd also like to understand the complications that come from having a NATO partner possibly acquiring a missile defense system from Russia, and the implications that could have for our assets in Russia, our manufacturing facilities for the Joint Strike Fighter, et cetera.
As you know, Senator Tillis, Turkey is the only NATO ally with an ongoing insurgency inside its own country. We assist them as all of NATO does. We've got Spanish and Italian missile batteries in Turkey to protect them against any Iranian threat. But this Syria, the complexity of the Syria fight has colored everything in that region, to include Turkey, which has had an enormous refugee influx, and they have gone through an attempted haphazard coup that cost them innocent people killed. We are seriously concerned across NATO about the S-400 buy, the Russian system.
Has there ever been another NATO ally that's done something like that?
Well, to a degree, as you know, the Eastern European countries that were equipped with Russian equipment.
Well, they had a legacy environment, but I mean, after you've gotten past that,
I'm not aware of any.
Would-be adversary, has that ever happened?
I'm not aware of any.
Is it also? I know I can't do you all's job, but it is also. Aren't there other complexities just based on the inherent infrastructure that comes with that system with respect to our own intelligence, safety, and security within there? Look, I agree. We need to protect Turkey. We need to help them make their homeland safe. But this seems like to be an outlier, unlike any time that's happened since NATO was established. Is that an overstatement?
I don't believe so, Senator. I think that's accurate, and it's causing a lot of concern.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Rono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of you, gentlemen, for your service to our country. And Secretary Mattis, thank you very much for your continuing commitment to end what you refer to as a cancer of sexual assault in the military. I wanted to further ask you, Secretary Mattis, the National Defense Strategy mentions expanding and strengthening alliances in the Indo-Pacific region, and the Daniel K. Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies is just one of several assets in Hawaii that is tailor-made for this mission, and your continued support is very much appreciated. I'd like to applaud you for your efforts in building partnerships and alliances, and it's not lost on me that you have made several trips to the region and hosted several regional leaders in the Pentagon since the National Defense Strategy was released. So besides our traditional allies in that part of the world, where are the best possibilities for new partnerships in the region, and what attributes do these countries share that make them strategically important to the United States? I also want to ask you about the importance of our compacts with Palau, the Confederated States of Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands.
Well, Senator, the Pacific is a priority theater, as you and I have discussed since my first days in your office.
Yes.
There is an ongoing effort to build our military structure in the Pacific, and much of this is by, with, and through our allies. Mm-hmm. And I would say from down under in Australia all the way up through Japan and Korea, you see this actively underway. We also have to be open to nations such as Indonesia, the fulcrum of the Indo-Pacific region, Vietnam, as it comes of age and adapts with many of their students here in our country being educators. We build new ties for the future. But probably most importantly, as we look overall at this region, I'd look at India, largest democracy on the planet, and one where we probably have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to find more common ground. I think it's there. We just have to find it. We don't have to search hard for it in the sense of creating it. We just have to get an understanding of each other's interests, and I think there's a lot of common ground there. So the attributes you see are geographic. Mm-hmm. They're based on a potential military commonality in terms of threat, whether it be as you've seen in the Sulu Sea area, where ISIS has come in strength and created a problem for Malaysia, Indonesia, but especially so for the Philippines. These are all issues that we have to work together if we want to keep the Pacific a stable commerce zone for all countries to use.
What about the importance of our compacts with the island nations that I mentioned, Palau, Micronesia, and Marshall?
I would just tell you, Senator, that we recruit from there. As you know, they're young men and women serve in our armed forces. And we have got probably, in terms of military relationships, an unusually high degree of trust between the United States and those nations. There's probably a lot more that we will be doing in the future along the lines of the direction we're going right now. And I don't see any inhibition on their side or our side to an even better relationship, partnership.
Some of these compacts will come due, and I assume that we're going to be negotiating with them again, and that these compacts are there for national security reasons. Is that correct?
They are there for that, and I think there's also an affiliation that goes back many decades
Yes.
of friendship that we share with them.
And we have certain continuing responsibilities for our country's use of their lands. Secretary Mattis, while current events may lead to decreased tensions with North Korea, I applaud DoD's commitment to defending the homeland from ballistic missiles. So the DoD budget request includes funding for additional ground-based interceptors, but also funding for new sensor capability, such as the Homeland Defense Radar in Hawaii. How will these new sensors increase our ability to defend Hawaii and the continental United States?
Senator, those capabilities will allow us to detect launches from various angles. That means sooner, track them, and determine if they're a threat or not to the homeland. And the homeland is Guam, Hawaii. Let me be very particular here. Guam, Hawaii, Alaska, and the United States. That means we have more engagement time.
And I think that our ability to accurately detect missiles coming our way is very important. As I'm sure you're aware that we had a false alarm in Hawaii recently. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for advocating for more funding for the military. Without you, we could not have done it. So thank you both. Let's go to Afghanistan, then we're going to work our way around to Syria. I talked to the Afghan ambassador yesterday. He said that the rules of engagement changing, targeting the Taliban as part of the enemy force is really beginning to pay dividends. Do you see that, General Dunford?
I do, Senator.
Secretary Mattis?
Yes, sir.
And the goal is to punish the Taliban, to get them at the table, and end this thing through negotiation. Is that correct?
The goal is to make sure they view that the only solution is a political solution, that they can't win on the battlefield.
And we're making sure they're not going to win on the battlefield. And I want to compliment you and President Trump for changing those rules of engagement. Do you believe that a residual force is necessary in Afghanistan for a while to come, and it should be conditions-based if we ever leave?
I do believe that, and that is consistent with our strategy, Senator Graham.
Secretary Mattis, is that
Yes, sir.
to those senators that advocate leaving Afghanistan, on September the 10th, 2001, we did not have one soldier in Afghanistan, did we, Secretary Mattis?
That's correct, Senator.
We didn't have an embassy. We didn't have a diplomat. We didn't offer them a dime of aid. We got attacked anyway. Do you agree with me? Leaving them alone doesn't mean they're going to leave you alone.
Problems in places like that don't stay there, sir.
Okay. So we can't build a wall between us and the threats coming from the Mideast, but we certainly can confront them. And I like your strategy in Afghanistan. I think you got the right size force with the right abilities. Iraq. What did we learn by leaving too soon, General Dunford?
We learned that the Iraqi forces weren't capable of providing security inside the country, and that gave the enemy an opportunity to resurge. That's where really ISIS had the space to grow.
Couldn't agree with you more. General Mattis, working with our Iraqi partners and coalition partners, we've done a pretty good job of suppressing ISIS in Iraq. Do you agree with that?
I do, sir, although the fight goes on, but yes, sir, absolutely.
Would you support a residual force based on conditions conditions for withdrawal, conditions-based withdrawal in Iraq if the Iraqis agreed with it?
Absolutely, and that force, it will be augmented right now by a NATO training element that is there so that it won't be just the Americans.
I couldn't agree with you more. More people need to contribute money. President Trump's right to that. The Arabs need to pay more, and other countries need to contribute more. But do you agree with the following statement? There is really no substitute for the American military when it comes to a holding force. We have capabilities most people don't.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Now let's go to Syria. The goal is to destroy ISIL, the total destruction of ISIS, and to combat the malign influence of Iran. Is that the two goals that y'all have been articulating?
Sir, our forces in Syria right now are there to defeat ISIS. There is a political process underway to end the civil war, but the chemical weapons are a separate and distinct issue.
So here's and we've known each other for a long time. I'm with you. And I don't know, is the president statement about withdrawing from Syria, is that conditions-based withdrawal, or is he just going to withdraw because he's tired of being in Syria?
It is conditions-based. As you know, neither the last administration nor this administration sees itself occupying Syria. What we have to do is keep our diplomats in a position of authority so they can end this through the Geneva process.
Right. But when it comes to ISIS, the goal is to make sure they're ultimately destroyed. Is that correct?
Destroyed, and also they cannot regenerate. So we have to we have to create local forces that can keep the pressure on any attempt by ISIS to try to regenerate.
Do you see those local forces being able to accomplish that mission better than the Iraqi army when we left Iraq?
Sir, we'll have to mature those forces. We're engaged in it now. We have training going on by a number of our international partners. They're on the ground right now, as well as our own forces.
I only have a few minutes. Would you fair to say that a holding force right now without us would be a risky proposition for a while to come?
I'm confident that that we would probably regret it.
Okay. Turkey. If we leave too soon, Turkey's going to go after the Kurds that helped us destroy ISIS. Are you worried about that? We got to get that situation right before we leave.
We are working with Turkey
Is that a concern
to resolve
of yours?
this. I don't know if that's Turkey's intent, but we certainly have to set the conditions to prevent that.
Yeah, they've said they hate these guys more than ISIS. They've actually attacked them. That, to me, needs to be a condition because nobody else will help you in the future. As to countering Iran, the military strike, I thought, was not a big price. I don't think it's going to change the battlefield equation. I don't see how you go to Geneva until the battlefield changes. I don't see a change on the battlefield until there's some credible force opposing Assad. I think we should be part of that. If we're not, we're giving Damascus to the Iranians. We depart here, I think you need to have some kind of element on the ground in Syria to combat Assad. It's in our interest that we not give Iran to Damascus. And the good news is there are millions of Syrians who want Assad to go. For another discussion for another time, thank you both.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mattis, it occurs to me we have to make an important decision here within the next hour, which is the confirmation of Mike Pompeo to be Secretary of State. And it occurs to me, Secretary Mattis, that you may be a good witness in this decision, in the sense that you have worked with him directly on the National Security Council. I suspect you've been in the Situation Room in the Oval Office. What is your view of his, I think, two issues that are of concern, judgment and willingness to tell the President, give the President his best advice based upon his information and not necessarily what the President wants to hear?
Senator, you're right. I have worked with him for over 14 months. I have worked with him intimately during that time. I would just tell you I've seen a rigorous intellect. His judgment has been mature and objective while still applying subjective elements. It's not just a brittle approach to problem solving. He's never shy about providing his input, to include when it was not the direction the discussion was going, and he had to stand in opposition to the desires of some of us in the sit room.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate your providing that. General Dunford, you were asked about what's going on in Yemen, and you were saying we're making progress and it's a cultural change. There was a report just this morning, allegedly 3,500 schools in Yemen have been targeted by Saudi airstrikes. I don't know if that's true, that's an allegation, but I just worry that we're complicit in something that will turn out in the hindsight of history to be a humanitarian tragedy. And I would appreciate it if, for the record, you could supply us with what controls we have, what limitations we have, what we're doing to be sure that that's not the case.
Senator, I will. I'll reply for the record, but what I would say here this morning is we are not at all involved in what we describe as the kill chain. So we're not involved in what targets to strike.
But my concern is that we can say that, but if we're doing intelligence and refueling, we've got our hands on this thing. We've got our fingerprints on it. And we can't then say, well, we don't know what they're going to do with that fuel we put in their jets. I don't think that's going to be an acceptable answer if we find out, well, I think we're finding out now that some pretty bad stuff is happening with our engagement. I really hope you'll give this some thought and give us some solid.
Senator, I fully understand your concerns. We'll outline that for you.
Thank you. To get back to the budget, which is the subject of this hearing, just looking at the numbers, I think it's very important that the public understand that we're talking about the lowest percentage of GDP for the defense budget in something like 70 years, 3.1%. I noticed in looking in the absolute numbers, this year's proposal is actually below the appropriation for 2010. So here we are 9 years later, and 2010 was 691. You're talking about 686. So I just think it's important to put those figures into context. And Mr. Norquist, a question to you. It occurs to me that one of the things that's happening in the defense budget is that we're recapitalizing. Mm-hmm. We're, in a sense, paying deferred maintenance in terms of readiness, in terms of upgrading systems like the Ohio-class submarine that haven't been upgraded in 30 years, the B-21. Mm-hmm. I would think in your position it would be helpful to us who have to justify this budget mm-hmm. to our constituents to break that down a bit, mm-hmm. to say, okay, what is it that's current operations and what is it that's paying past mm-hmm. due bills in effect? Do you agree that that's part of what's happening here?
I do, and just to put it in context, if instead of sequestration back in 2011, Congress had simply capped defense at inflation, didn't allow for pay raises and everything else, that's the number you'd be at now. The difference is you wouldn't have had several $100 billion of lost buying capacity. You wouldn't have been missing maintenance on equipment. You wouldn't have been having older planes that aren't getting replaced. So you're not even in the same position. So the fact that it took Congress to raise the ceiling on the by $85 billion just to get back to where inflation alone would have put the defense budget shows you how deep a hole the department has been in during that period of sequestration and the disruption to the military's readiness.
I think it's very important to make that point to the public because sometimes people just look at the mm-hmm. number and say this is a huge number, it's more than other countries. Actually, we're not the highest country in the world in terms of percentage of GDP. I think we're 4th or 5th. And that's really, I think, the appropriate way to look at it. Mm-hmm. Final question, and this is a short one because I'm already out of time. Secretary Mattis, I presume, based upon your prior testimony, that you think it's important to maintain and rebuild our diplomatic capacity at the State Department. That's a part of our national security apparatus, is it not?
They are critical to our national security, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Scott.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to the panel. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for your service to this country. Secretary Mattis, General Dunford, Secretary Norquist, I may be a little biased here, but I don't think that I am. I think South Carolina is the epicenter of training and readiness for our military. Whether it's Fort Jackson, where we train more than half of the enlisted soldiers, or Paris Island, Secretary Mattis, where we actually make half of the Marines, or the Navy Nuke School, where we prepare our sailors, or Shaw Air Force Base, where we have the largest F-16 wing in the Air Force, or if it's going to theater, it's likely going through a C-17 at Charleston Air Force Base, not to mention both Spay-War and the Savannah River site, which I think is a forward-leaning, forward-looking part of our military. So when the National Defense Strategy discusses a return to great power competition with Russia and China, I'm very interested in seeing America leverage the ingenuity and the imagination for our nation to ensure that there is never a so-called level playing field for our adversaries. To ensure American dominance in all areas, we must innovate faster and bring new capabilities like hypersonic weapons, directed energy, and advanced unmanned aircraft to the field sooner. With additional funding for R&D, how are we working to make sure that we get those new technologies in the hands of our warfighters as soon as conceivably possible? Secretary Mattis, please begin.
Right. Senator, what we're doing right now is, because of the Congress reorganized us, you expressed your displeasure over years with what we would call acquisition technology and logistics. You broke it in half. Ellen Lord now runs acquisition and sustainment. That's the current fighters you see, F-16s there, the current C-17s, that sort of thing is being addressed by Ellen Lord. But you also set up research and engineering under Michael Griffin, did our Undersecretary confirmed him. And he has the responsibility for directed energy, for hypersonics, for joint artificial intelligence efforts. So we are organizing now for an expeditious, output-oriented exploration in research of these advanced technologies that we know are going to play a role. As we speed this forward, that's how we get them out in the hands of the troops fast, not by having more studies done, but by actually having something developed and fly a hypersonic vehicle by X day, and now everybody works together. We're also concentrating the department's efforts that were somewhat diffuse, which is not uncommon with new technology, but now we know what we need to focus on, so we're pulling those together so the Army, the Navy, the Air Force are working together as service departments in making this a synergistic effort.
Thank you. It certainly is, looking at the comments of Secretary Griffin in the HASC hearing about our inability to even see them coming. Yes. It's an important need for us to expedite that process as quickly as conceivably possible. Did you want to add anything, General?
The only thing I'd say is one of the other things, Senator, so we've talked a little bit about science and technology, research and development. A really key piece, too, is our exercises and experimentation. One of the key elements of the Secretary's strategy is to make sure that we regenerate our exercise program. It has suffered, admittedly, as a result of the operational tempo over the last decade. But as we look forward, better joint exercises, a core element of which is joint experimentation, will help move some of those capabilities through the pipeline a bit faster. And so I think there really is three pieces, two of which you spoke about, but that third piece is really critical, and particularly going into this summer, that's an area of particular interest for the Secretary and I.
Thank you. I want to continue on the subject of keeping the perch that we have, Secretary. You and several of your predecessors have stated how important it is for us to address our adversaries' theft or acquisition of intellectual property and sensitive defense-related technology. You have officially endorsed the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act, FIRMA, which Senator Cornyn and others on this committee, including myself, introduced to modernize the way we screen foreign investment for national security risks. Do you see FIRMA, while not necessarily a silver bullet, as one crucial step towards addressing the China threat?
It's critical on China, on a number of other threats that we face. From cyber, for example, is not only from China, but I would also point out that one of the reasons Secretary Mnuchin orchestrated the sanctions against China goes to the very heart of what you were just talking about, the intellectual property theft.
Yes. Would you support including FIRMA as a part of the NDAA?
I would have no reservations whatsoever about it, Senator. It is a broader effort, however, much broader effort than just Department of Defense. So I wouldn't want it to become a military priority effort and not the same priority for others. It's got to be a whole of government. For example, Treasury Department, Commerce, Department of Energy, Homeland Security, they all have a role in this.
Yes. I'm on the Banking Committee, and we're working on it as well on the non-defense side. Do you believe, as the National Defense Strategy and your previous public comments suggest, that China poses the most significant national security threat to the country still?
Senator, I think the one thing that this administration would be graded on most critically 10 or 15 years from now, historians will look back and say, did we develop a relationship with China, that a mature relationship, a productive relationship? Did we do everything we could as we look at the long-range competition to keep it out of war and into a more productive stance? And at the same time, some of the things that you've initiated, like INERVA, are absolutely critical that we take our own side in this competition. So I think this is critical as you look at it, but there's nothing that dictates this has to go to a force of arms between us if we do this right along the lines of something you're doing right now.
Thank you, sir. I'll just close, Mr. Chairman, with this comment that, from my assessment, China's successful acquisition of U.S. technology is what helps them be a near-peer competitor.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the witnesses' testimony. It's been an instructive morning. I want to do a Senator Kane broken record topic and talk to you about congressional authorization for military force. You each appeared before the Defense Subcommittee of Senate Appropriations about a year ago, March 22, 2017. Secretary Mattis, you stated then, quote, "I would take no issue with the Congress stepping forward with an AUMF. I think it would be a statement of the American people's resolve if you did so. I've thought the same thing for the last several years, I might add, and have not understood why the Congress hasn't come forward with this, at least a debate, because I believe ISIS is a clear and present danger we face." General Dunford, the same day you stated, quote, "I agree with the Secretary. I think not only would it be a sign of the American people's resolve, but truly I think our men and women would benefit from an authorization of the use of military force that would let them know that the American people, in the form of their Congress, were fully supportive of what they're doing out there every day as they put their lives in harm's way." Are your feelings today generally consistent with the testimony you gave in the Senate a year ago on this topic?
Generally, they are, Senator. I will say that we believe right now the operations we're conducting are legal, and we have a feedback loop to the Congress to make certain we're not doing anything that where you're not kept informed. We would need the right AUMF, and you and I have discussed it, and that would be the only caveat. I would say we would not want to end up restricting ourselves.
General Dunford?
Senator, I feel the same way, and I think what the Secretary said is what I would have said first is, you know, what I'd be concerned about changes is just making sure that we have the inherent flexibility that we have today to be able to prosecute an enemy that doesn't respect boundaries and time.
Secretary Mattis, you then, after the March hearing that I described, sent a letter to the Senate Foreign, I think actually to the Senate Majority Leader in September of 2017, and then together with Secretary Tillerson appeared before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the end of October 2017. And in that letter and hearing, you talked about some of the sort of limitations or concerns that you might have, that the idea of an authorization, the idea of congressional expression of resolve would be a good thing, but that as on the operational side, you would have concerns, and you shared in that letter and in that testimony some of the concerns that you have. I don't need to go through those, but you remember those. Is that still generally your point, that if we could do a congressional authorization, great, but take into account some of the reservations or concerns you expressed?
Yes, sir. I'm still aligned with those comments.
I have worked on this matter, and I've proceeded upon an additional assumption that I think is important for Congress, that if we were to do an authorization, it would be very important that the authorization be done in a way that was bipartisan, so that we wouldn't be sending aside either to the American public or especially to our troops that support for military action against non-state terrorist groups, for example, is something that just one party supports and not the other, because then that would raise a question of, okay, a good or bad election might then lead to a lack of resolution, which would make people wonder whether they were being supported out on the battlefield. Do you share that thought, that if we can do a resolution, it shouldn't only be one that protects operations, but also expresses a bipartisan resolve of Congress?
I think it's critical that our adversaries and our allies see a unified America when we make the grave decision to put our troops in harm's way, sir.
Just as I close, Senator Corcoran and I have introduced an authorization that is being taken up by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee soon. We've attempted to incorporate into that authorization, Secretary Mattis, some of the concerns you expressed in the letter of September 2017 and the subsequent congressional testimony. It is bipartisan and thus involves compromises, but since the chair of that committee has indicated a desire to take it up and put it through a markup in the committee, I look forward to working together with you and other administration officials so that we can hopefully get this right and express that bipartisan resolve that I think our troops deserve.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator, yeah, but he was here first. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Actually, I think it's... Okay, Senator Donnelly. I'll remind those remaining that while our timer has malfunctioned, we'll remind you.
Is there a reason you said that right before I spoke, Mr. Chairman? Thank you very much to the witnesses. I want to thank all of you for your implementation of the Sexton Act requirements regarding military suicide. I know how hard you've worked on this. I know the efforts that have been put in and how you have worked hard to reduce that. As you look ahead, what are the top priorities now for you when you look at this and you try to determine what else can we do to move the ball here? What do you think are some of the things that we can still accomplish?
Senator Donnelly, we actually had a brief conversation about that with the House Appropriations Committee yesterday, and I think one of the more promising things that we've seen is this kind of interdisciplinary model of mental health care. So that's had a big impact. But we do have significant shortages of the right experts in the right places, and it's hard to sometimes attract the right amount. You know, we have a small population of uniformed experts, and then we rely on some contract support. And there's certain places where our forces are, and you've certainly seen the same scourge with veterans, where getting the right care to the right people is a difficult thing. So leveraging things like telemedicine, finding ways to deliver that multidisciplinary model, even in locations that are geographically difficult to attract the right people, I think is the key thing. But in my own personal experience, and I spend a little less time on it now than I have in previous assignments just because of the nature of my assignment, the single biggest change, in my judgment, has been the change in the culture of the medical profession to that multidisciplinary approach, and then combined with the full visibility of what's going on with an individual in the leadership realm or with the chaplain and so forth. So, you know, what I used to tell people is if I knew as much about people when they were alive as I found out about them after they die, we would have been able to do something to help fix this. So I think that that multidisciplinary approach is probably the biggest thing in terms of investment, and then making sure that we actually do know as much about our men and women when they're alive as we sometimes find out after they die is probably the biggest thing we need to continue to emphasize. Piece of it is resources, but a piece of it is continuing to have the kind of decisive, engaged leadership that we've seen be successful.
Thank you. Another thing that you've been working with me and with all of us on in Syria is to try and find the young men and women who ISIS killed while they were there. And we appreciate all your hard work, and I just want to say one more time, if we could continue to keep looking and continue to make that effort, it would mean the world to those families who have young people who are still over there.
Please assure them, Senator, that we are doing exactly that. We track this. We get reports frequently about leads. There is no stone left unturned as we try to resolve this.
And as we're looking at Syria, you know, you hear things from here, from over there, from wherever. When we talk about leaving as soon as we have wrapped up ISIS, I have great fears of seeing history repeat itself in some ways, that we simply head out, and the second we do, ISIS comes back in. And I know that the Department of Defense, General Dunford, you've all said, look, we're just not walking away, but I want to make sure that we have a plan in place to protect those people in those regions that we've stood with, who we've given our word to, and who have relied on us as partners and have stuck their necks out for us as well.
Senator, what we're doing right now is we're helping the local places that we've liberated put together their own leadership, civilian councils, we call them. We're training their police chief, the deputy chief, and a handful of others. So when they bring people in, they've got some professional folks there. So if ISIS tries to come back at them, they're taken care of. Then we're working the political process to make sure they're not left adrift. in terms of not having a seat at the table for their future, their longer-term future. That's a diplomatically led effort, but it's one that State Department, Brett McGurk, former Secretary Tillerson, Acting Secretary Sullivan will have been working on, so there'll be no loss of momentum as we go forward.
Yeah, I worry about them looking up one day, the local forces, and seeing the trucks coming back in with ISIS. Yeah. And we don't want to, as they say, we don't want to buy the same real estate twice. Yeah. I also want to ask, what does success in Afghanistan look like a year from now?
Sir, it's probably going to take more than a year is the first point I would make.
If you're a year out, where do you want to be, and then what does success look like?
A more capable Afghan force between their military and their police, the violence level going down. As you know, the Taliban have been unable to take over any more district or provincial centers since last August, and as a result, they've turned to high visibility bombings for the very outcome they've achieved, which is getting a lot of news, that sort of thing. I think, too, that we're going to see fewer casualties. We dominate the area. In other words, we've got NATO air support for them on the ground now with people from NATO countries calling the support. We've sent over reinforcements. And lastly, you'll see elections ongoing. You'll notice that one of the targets of the Taliban is the election campaign. We're going to sustain this effort under President Ghani, get the elections in, and it'll be a reminder to everybody in the country that the Taliban know they can't win through ballots. That's why they turn to bombs. That does not endear them to the population.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Donnelly. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Cruz, our timer is not functioning properly. We'll let you know this time.
I'll try to take no more than 40 minutes. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome. Thank you for your service. Let's start with the topic that is much in the news, which is Iran. Mr. Secretary, in your judgment, what would be the national security implications for the United States if Iran were to acquire nuclear weapons?
I think the implications for the United States and for every nation in the region, it would be an increased level of danger at a level we have never experienced from this regime.
General Dunford, anything to add on that same question?
No, I think the Secretary captured that, Senator. I mean, given the behavior of Iran and how difficult it is to deal with all the other challenges they present, certainly the possession of a nuclear weapon would be of great concern.
Let's shift to another topic. Let's shift to space. General Dunford, you've acknowledged that, quote, unlike previous eras when space was considered a benign and unchallenged environment, space is now a contested domain. And based on that shared assessment, I introduced language in last year's NDAA, which my colleagues on this committee supported, that officially labeled space as a combat domain and called for a policy to develop and field an integrated system of assets to protect our space-based capabilities, to deter or deny attacks in space, and to defend the U.S. homeland, our allies, and deployed forces. In your judgment, what is the United States' greatest military comparative advantage in space relative to Russia and China?
Senator, I think there's really a few, if you don't mind me listing them. I mean, sure. One is obviously we leverage space for our command and control systems. We leverage it for navigation, and that also includes our ability to deliver precision munitions. And the other area that we leverage it for is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So, you know, for example, when North Korea was doing testing, just to put a finer point on it, the first indicators we had that there was a missile test came from our space-based assets. So we really do have we do leverage space for some of the core capabilities of the department.
And what are our greatest vulnerabilities in space, and what are we doing and should we be doing to mitigate those vulnerabilities?
Well, what we see with China, Russia, and to some degree some other countries, they develop the ability to jam our systems. They develop the ability to laze or blind our systems. They're some of the biggest challenges. And then one that was referred to earlier is we've got a lot of space junk out there that puts at risk our targets, and as that increases, that becomes a greater threat as well. So those would be the three that I would highlight.
Let me shift to a related topic, which is missile defense. In the last decade, near-peer competitors like Russia and China have been able to rapidly test and field technologies that have given them the edge in hypersonic flight. These hypersonic weapon systems can be launched and flown in methods traditionally associated with ballistic missiles. The combination of speed, trajectory, and maneuverability make these systems increasingly challenging for our missile defense systems to defend against them and ultimately defeat them. How do you view the dual necessity of, number one, developing new missile defense capabilities to intercept hypersonics earlier in flight, and number two, furthering the development of our own hypersonics?
Sir, the reorganization of acquisition technology and logistics now has someone focused on these areas. Mike Griffin's with a NASA Lincoln Labs background. Hypersonics is the #1 priority, both having them for ourselves, excuse me, it's been a long morning, but also the defense against them. We can go into a classified briefing for you, sir, about where we're going with it, but I would just register that it's our #1 priority in the developing technology.
Well, and obviously, please let this committee know what else we need to be doing to assist in that. Let me finally focus on the administration has taken very positive steps to strengthen missile defense in the Korean Peninsula, particularly with the deployment of THAAD batteries. Even so, the capability is calibrated for ballistic missiles and is ill-equipped to defend against conventional threats like rockets, artillery, mortars, of which North Korea has stockpiled a staggering level, both to hold Seoul hostage and also to target capabilities like THAAD. In your judgment, what steps should we take to further protect South Korea against North Korean rockets, artillery, or mortars?
Senator, I'll start with that. Only so much can be done with defensive capabilities, and a key element of dealing with the challenges presented by North Korea is our offensive strike capability as well. And one of the things that we really have started to work on over the last 15 months, to truth be told, we diverted a lot of our intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance assets away from the peninsula for a long period of time. And so if you ask me right now what's the best way to get after that problem is increase our intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. We call that find the threat, and then be in a position to conduct strikes against the threat. And our plans, without speaking with specificity today, are very much focused on more concerted strikes against that artillery rockets and denying them that capability. So it's really a combination, in my view, of there is a baseline of defensive capabilities that we need to have in the Greater Seoul area in particular, but also enhancing better the ability to conduct offensive strikes against those systems.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be quick. When we talk about challenges in space, we got to talk about challenges in cyber. And I'd like to take it from a different standpoint. Not only the cyber threat to the country, but to what degree is the Department of Defense, our Cyber Command, going to be involved in cyber-enabled information operations like the Russians did to us in the 2016 election? Is that something you want to talk to in a different forum?
It would be best in a different forum, sir.
Okay. Niger, one of those service members was from Florida. They're just about to produce the report. And in fact, the families, as we speak, have been informed. Is there anything that you can tell us, Mr. Secretary, about the report?
Sir, we have a 200-page summary. I know that sounds like a long summary, but it was a very involved investigation spanning 3 continents. The last family will be notified on Monday. Already in your classified vaults, the SASC has available the 200-page. I can also get the 6,300 pages up. Many of those pages I've read. But I think right now we have found what we believe to be the crux of the problems, not problem, but problems that contributed to this. It was not a delegation of authority problem. So we know immediately how to address, and we are doing that right now, addressing those problems.
Finally, and I will go and I will read that report. Quickly, you've touched a lot today on Syria, but the truth is that Iran now has a land bridge all the way to Beirut, through Iraq, through Syria, on into Lebanon. Is there any additional thing that you want to share, Mr. Secretary, about how we're going to protect our interest in Syria, given that that is a new significant threat?
Well, the broader strategy, sir, has got to take this into account. And if Iran does not change its behavior, and I have no reason to think that they will under the current regime, the Iranian people are held hostage by this regime leadership. So long as they continue to fund the level of proxy warfare, whether it be in Yemen or the explosives they send into Saudi Arabia or into Bahrain, and then you're pointing out the crescent as they try to resupply their proxy in Lebanon and Syria through a land bridge. I would just suggest that Iraq has not yet succumbed to the idea that they need to be a rump state of the Iranian regime. And I believe that we are well advised to continue to support the Iraqi security forces and the legitimate government in Baghdad as one of the ways to avoid this becoming a reality. I would also say that the Geneva process in resolving the Syria civil war would set the conditions for more interruption of that. And then, of course, Lebanese Hezbollah has got to be looked at as a separate and distinct problem inside Lebanon.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. The majority and the minority have agreed in that there are votes taking place right now, that the conclusion of the remarks and questions by Senator Blumenthal, we will be adjourned.
Senator Blumenthal is recognized.
Senator Blumenthal is recognized.
Am I recognized?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I will be brief because we do have votes, and I want to first and foremost apologize for being absent for a large part of the hearing. A lot has been going on in the Judiciary Committee and other committees, and I will ask one brief question and then perhaps supplement the record with others. Have you seen any change in North Korea's cyber activities since the diplomatic discussions concerning a meeting between Kim and President Trump?
We have not seen a change. Now, I didn't specifically go in and look at this in the last week or two, but I get the reports routinely, frankly. So I cannot give you a good answer on that, straight answer on it, sir. But I can get back to you, sir, and tell you what we find.
Because I have the impression over the years that I've been on the Armed Services Committee that their cyber activities have mounted over the years. Obviously, yes. They've attacked us on a number of occasions. So I'd be very interested in your response. As I say, I have other questions that I would like to put to you, and in light of the vote and in light of your very long and valuable attendance here and your forthright answers, I'm going to spare you any more time. But thank you for your service, and thank you for all you do for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.